My name is Kyle. With me are Johanna, Omer, and Vaughn. We are doing a presentation on the full engineering classification of King Campus.
To understand how to calculate land using the ECL system from the Ministry of Natural Resources. The study area is located in the northeast corner of Humber watershed.
So I'm gonna start talking about the testing of the soil sample that was conducted in the lab. So firstly, we determine the engineering characteristics of the soil that is so important for the plants growing and regulating the movement of air and water, at the same time influencing roots develop and affecting nutrients availability. So that's why it's so important, like show the phase diagram label with the weight and volume is also important, like the relationship between both. Uh, where this with this data, we determine the mass of the water, the solid, and the total mass. At the same time, the volume of the soil, the water, and the total volume. And so, with that information, we determine also the volume of the void that was like 4.82 centimeters cubic. That is mean the spaces in between the individual grade in soil. At the same time, our density was 2.04. The relative density was 2.19. The drive density was 1.59. Um, the void radio porosity and water also was determined. Um, when we're talking about the moist content or like water content, that it was like 28.19%, we're talking about like the that is so important uh, because we determine science in situ soil are used of the basis for the construction of highways and other structures, and the amount of water affect the degree of compactation of the particle of the soil. So the second test next that was like perform a drive self analysis of the collect sample. So here the we are talking about the grain size. So the grain size have like two ways, and it also is one of the two properties used in the soil in the classification of soil. So there are two ways to determine the grain size. One, like first one is for the CF analysis that which is used for gravel and and sand, and the hydrometer test that is used for silt and clay. So according to the table 2, as you can see, is evidence that more than 50% of the soil passing through the number 200 sieve, that is mean uh, the grain, like the soil, was passing through the zero point 0.075 millimeters, which indicates that 41.38% of the sample uh, is classified as fine grain soil. So next, so in the next PowerPoint, also you can see like the percentage of gravel of sand fines, and the particulates are finer than 16. So the gravel percentage is 0.56, the sand 57.61, and the fines is it was 41.38 as I mentioned. And the soil particulates are finer than 16 is 0.067. So, what about the hydrometer analysis? According to these results, so the hydrometer analysis is not required because the percentage of soil it was passing is greater than 50%. So, and we continue using this data to identify the soil using the UNIS soil classification system. So, next one. So here, to determine the plastic limits and the liquid limits, the USCS flow chart was using in conjunction with a mechanical seal. Here, we determine the 41.38 of our sample is being thinner than 0.067, 75 millimeters, and also the 27.87% of the sample being captured of the 0.50 millimeters CF. With this soil was using uh, to do like the test, the Attenberg limit test. This methodology or the Attenberg limit gives us a mean by which soil consistent can be defined for cohesion soil. Uh, that one we measure like we have to like it's also important that the relationship between the water and the moist content and the physical phase of the soil. Here, as you can see, the water content of the soil, uh, we determine the plastic limit, that is the water content of the soil, when it's changed from a semi-solid state. So when we determine the plastic limit, we was like is what we using the water or the moist content and the dry mass. With that, we just like uh, determine the average between the plastic limit of for each trial and the liquid limit that was 23.5 was determined by the
To classify the soil, we used the USCS, or the Unified Soil Classification System, in conjunction with the sieve analysis to more easily define the type of soil that we were working with. So looking at the flow chart, we did have more than 50% of our sample pass the number 200 sieve. This defined it as a fine grained soil. We also were able to chart the liquid limit and the plastic limit to determine that we had a low liquid limit for our soil as well, and that our plasticity chart, when we plotted in the CL and ML hatched area. This is because our plasticity index was 6.2% and our liquid limit was 23.5%. So as you can see in figure 6, 6.2% and 23% respectively fall in this where we have it marked here on the chart. And that's how we were able to determine it was a silty clay with low plasticity. And now I'll talk about the results. The soil sample profile in the field yielded organic matter making up the first 3 centimeters of the 1 meter sampled, with clays dividing the middle and lower sections of the sample from 10 centimeters to 1 meter in depth. This was consistent with the results from the sieve analysis, with 41.9% of the sample being smaller than 0.075 millimeters. The effective texture of the soil sample was determined using the sieve analysis. The sample contained 3.2 grams of gravel, or 0.8% of the total mass. Sand made up 110 grams, or 38.2% of the total mass, and the remaining 155.9 grams, or 41.8% of the soil consisted of silts and clay. The soil contained 22% water, as was determined from laboratory testing in Table 4. The substrate was mainly clay and sand with trace amounts of organic matter. The presence of clay in the soil inhibits the drainage properties, making the presence of glaze present throughout the sample collected.
Okay, now we're gonna go to the discussion part. The first question is the ecosystem type of this site. So the environmental in an area display many characteristics that prove that this was indeed a terrestrial ecosystem. The first one is we can see here is the abundant of fungi found in the area. Fungi is typically found in a terrestrial system, as they are crucial in decomposing dead plant bodies and helping recycle the nutrient. Another characteristic is interaction between the biotic and abiotic factors in the area. This makes easier to identify the ecosystem type. This interaction is evident through factors like photosynthesis, Plants in the area receive water through rainfall and enough sunlight, and the tree won't block up the site from the sun. Plants also receive carbon dioxide, which in turn is used to create oxygen. We move on to the next question: Is does this ecosystem coincide with the result of the substrate type? And the answer is yes. It's at the layer of organic matters you can see in the pictures, which is the leaves layer. And they also have rocks below 2 centimeters in thickness and a layer of mineral soil. Mineral material of variable texture not covered by organic matters. Most of the properties are similar to those of the terrestrial organism. It was primarily deciduous woodland containing trees such as the maple, Norway maple, and Manitoba maple, and it had a number of yellow fungi present in the area. That is the result that coincides with the ecosystem. Move on to the next one. Is we discussed the absence or presence of mottle and clay. And we can see in the pictures, soil was free from mottle in the upper 1 meters. And the clay is a marsh soil that has been soaked with groundwater for long enough to have the clayic color pattern. As we can see in the pictures here, we can see that they're clay brownish soil. So because when the experiment occur, the soil wet and clay is expected. The next question is the system makes sense with the ecosystem types makes sense. This is a natural site as has been human influence. So the system here is a terrestrial ecology system, and this is consistent with what had been analyzed. The ecosystem here is quite primitive, with only some human intervention, such as the trail created when the student and campus employees walk back and forth. The tree were left uncut, only fell when it's a natural action, and they were kept the same as they fallen. There's nothing come in between. There's only one small shed about 60 square feet. You can see in the pictures. It's the only thing that human create in this site. The final question is what are the implications if for potential future development at the site? So what we think is any future development at the site is highly unlikely because this site is reserved for study purposes. The site was used for classes in environmental program for observation and experiments, as well as lectures. Aside from the path created by the frequent activities of the campus, the area was left at ease for future students to study. This is because of the Seneca College, they own the land and they use this for educational reason only. That's it.
And now our conclusion. The sample of the soil that was taken from the site was found to be fine-grained soil, as more than 40% of the soil passed through the number 200 sieve, or the 0.075 millimeter sieve. The plastic limit and the liquid limit of the soil were found to be 17.3% and 23.5% respectively. The plasticity index was found to be 6.2%, and that falls between the 4 to 7% range, so the soil was classified as a silty clay with low plasticity. The land that we used for the area of study was found to be of the terrestrial ecosystem class. The ecosystem was identified through characteristics such as the abundance of fungi, the interactions between biotic and abiotic factors, and the community in the site being deciduous woodland. The terrestrial ecosystem remains in its natural state with very minimal human disturbance and is very unlikely to go through any drastic future developments. Here's our references page, and that is the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, please ask, and thank you for listening.